Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Friday the 11th of October in London. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Coming up today.
I don't think there's been a major economic win yet.
As Labour approaches 100 days in power, we speak to business leaders who say they're still waiting for Keir Starmer's plan to reignite growth.
And in other news, Musk goes hands-free. Tesla unveils its long-awaited Cybercab prototype with no steering wheel or pedals.
Plus, the French government announces plans to tax top firms and reduce public spending in a bid to trim the country's colossal debt.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
UK investors and business leaders have told Bloomberg Radio that they're frustrated at the lack of action from the new Labour government as it approaches 100 days in office. Voices from across private equity, venture capital and finance say that while they appreciate Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves's rhetoric on economic growth, they're still waiting for them to deliver. Lloyd Lee is managing partner and co-founder of U Capital, which has invested £2.5 billion into the UK since 2010. He says that talk of tax hikes in the upcoming budget is spooking investors.
I mean, I think you have to call a spade a spade. If you raise the specter of significant increases in taxes anywhere in the world, people get nervous. And I mean people at all levels get nervous. If you're going to raise the specter of more taxes, you have to show what you're doing with the money and why. And I accept, and I think we all accept, that there have been some black holes that need to be filled in over the last several years. What people don't want to hear is you kept collecting taxes, you didn't invest it back into the country, and it didn't grow. So you just keep more black holes coming down the road.
Lloyd Lee's warning comes ahead of the budget on the 30th of October, during which Chancellor Rachel Reeves will announce how she plans to fill a £22 billion hole in the public finances. The investors who spoke to Bloomberg Radio expressed concern about tax changes, especially for private equity. Their comments come just days before the Prime Minister and the Chancellor convened their first international investment summit.
Keir Starmer has appointed former Darktrace CEO Poppy Gustafson as the UK's new investment minister. The Prime Minister filled the post just days ahead of a major government-led summit in London. Bloomberg's James Wilcock has more.
Rachel Reeves has made it clear her plans depend on bringing private investment back to Britain. Monday's summit is supposed to be a show of strength for Labour's business credentials. Corporate royalty like Alphabet's Ruth Porat, former Google CEO Eric Schmidt and Barclays boss C.S. Venkatakrishnan are all in attendance. But the surprise summer election has meant the event has been hurried together, with investors puzzled by the decision to have the summit before the budget. And some of global finance's biggest names can't make it, notably JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon and Blackstone's Steve Schwarzman. And we're still waiting to hear what the actual plans are to entice investors to plough new money into Britain's ageing infrastructure. In London, James Wilcock, Bloomberg Radio.
Now, Elon Musk has unveiled the long-awaited prototype of Tesla's Cybercab. According to the billionaire CEO, production may start in 2026, with the vehicle priced at under $30,000. At the unveiling event in California, Musk hitched a ride in the car before speaking about the future of autonomous transport.
You can think of it like individualized mass transit. The average cost of a bus per mile for a city, not the ticket price because that is subsidized, but the average price is about $1 a mile. Whereas the cost of Cybercab, we think probably over time, from the operating cost is probably going to be around 20 cents a mile.
Tesla's Elon Musk speaking there. Also showcased at the event was a robo-van concept, which Musk said could transport 20 people at once. The unveiling itself got underway an hour late, and according to Bloomberg reports, the robotaxi event has been delayed by several months. Musk has a track record of exceeding timelines he's set for a range of products.
The government in France is aiming to find more than €60 billion for its public finances with its new budget. Finance Minister Antoine Armand says officials are relying on spending cuts plus higher taxes on businesses, the wealthy and energy to tackle the country's colossal debt pile. Speaking before the official announcement, Charlotte de Montpellier, ING senior economist for France and Switzerland, told Bloomberg the government faces a difficult task.
First of all, there are a lot of measures that are being announced that are supposed to be temporary, but we know that probably won't be enough to put the deficit back into the right trajectories. We also know that this kind of measure, they tend to disappoint. So it means that even if they count on some revenue from those increase in taxes, it could be that in 1 year time they realize that at the end it was not enough.
That was Charlotte de Montpellier from ING. Under the plans, temporary levies will be placed on 440 companies with over €1 billion in revenue, a move the government forecasts will generate €12 billion by 2026. Around 65,000 households are due to face higher taxes aimed at bringing in €2 billion next year. Lawmakers are seeking to narrow the deficit to 5% of economic output in 2025 from a forecast 6.1% this year.
Chinese shares have fallen as caution grows ahead of a key weekend briefing that may shed more light on the scale of China's fiscal support. Investors and analysts expect Beijing to deploy as much as 2 trillion yuan, that's the equivalent of $283 billion, in fresh stimulus. Saturday's press conference comes as investors look for greater fiscal spending to arrest a slowdown that threatens to put China's 2024 target of about 5% of economic growth out of reach.
In the United States, 3 Federal Reserve policymakers have suggested they're unfazed by Thursday's higher than forecast September inflation report. However, a fourth hinted he may favour a pause at the Fed's next meeting based on the latest data. With more, here's Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
New York Fed President John Williams says month to month, quote, there's wiggles and bumps in the data, but we've seen this pretty steady process of inflation moving downward. Bank of Chicago President Austin Goolsbee in a CNBC interview said, quote, the overall trend for inflation over 12 to 18 months is clearly moving down. His counterpart from the Richmond Fed, Thomas Barkin, says inflation is definitely heading in the right direction. The outlier, Raphael Bostic, president of the Atlanta Fed, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, he revealed that in projections released in September, he'd called for one additional quarter-point cut this year. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Hurricane Milton has left millions without power and at least 10 people dead after hitting Florida. Nearly 3 million homes and businesses remain without electricity in the state, according to poweroutage.us. The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, says that people in the state are continuing to persevere.
To face 2 hurricanes in a couple weeks, not easy to go through, but I've seen a lot of resilience throughout this state. I think people just... when you're a Floridian, you kind of just know these are things that can happen, and you roll with it.
Governor DeSantis was touring damage from Hurricane Milton in Sarasota yesterday. The full scope of Milton's destruction, though, won't be known for days or perhaps even some weeks.
Well, let's focus now on our top story this morning. It's almost 100 days since Keir Starmer's Labour government was elected on a pledge to change Britain and reboot economic growth. But the investors and business people Labour courted ahead of that landslide win are increasingly concerned about progress and the big decisions in the budget. Our Caroline Hepker has been interviewing key investors across the city over the past 3 weeks to understand their verdict on the new government and what lies ahead. Caroline, barely 3 months since Labour swept back to power after 14 years. What is the economic verdict from the investors you've been speaking to?
Yeah, I've had a very interesting month talking to a smattering of vital investors and asking, whether the government's delivered on stability, what the big economic wins have been, what the fears around the budget really are. The verdict, I think, is frustrated, a bit unimpressed. Anne Glover, for example, who you heard right at the start of the programme, she's the co-founder of Amadeus Capital Partners. She's been an investor for 30 years. She says on delivering stability, it's too soon to tell because it implies a longer time frame, doesn't it, stability. She gives them the benefit of the doubt, but she's clear that they have not pulled off a major economic win yet. Michael Moore of the BVCA, so representing private equity and big investors, he says, yes, the government's ticked a lot of important early boxes. He even described it as small c conservative in its approach, this obviously being a left-leaning UK government. But he's concerned about, the government has said a lot of the right things, but actually people need a bit more information. Have a listen to what he says.
Many of these ideas are still at kind of high-level conceptual stage, and we do need to see quite a lot more detail. But I think that investors, international investors, certainly want to see them develop.
So that was Michael Moore who was speaking there. He was talking, about the announcement around a wealth fund for the UK, GB Energy, those sorts of announcements, which he says are very top level. And then Mike Eakins, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Phoenix Group, sort of one of the big pension providers in the UK, big investors, UK's largest long-term savings and retirement provider. He was very much saying, we stand ready to invest alongside government and other businesses, but we need a pipeline of investable assets. So basically wanting more detail.
So this is all ahead of the investment summit that's taking place on Monday. What is the government hoping to achieve from this event?
Well, this is the difficulty. I mean, look, to their credit, the election happened a little bit sooner than perhaps we had thought, and so they have scrambled to deliver an event that in the past, under the previous Conservative government, has been successful. So they do have some big names, big money managers and multinational companies attending. The King is hosting a reception, and we've heard, for example, Alphabet's Ruth Port's going, the AI firm Wave, you've got the Brookfield asset management boss going, Elon Musk not invited. But still, the investors that I've been speaking to are frustrated. Have a listen to Mike Eakins, CIO at the Phoenix Group, with his expectations.
Our ask is that the government should be really bold in outlining what it wants to achieve from that investment summit.
So read between the lines, bold. That means, we need more direction, effectively. The government has now named their investment minister, a job that they struggled to fill. So that's the former Darktrace CEO, Poppy Gustafsson. But their first choice, wouldn't take up the role. That's Benjamin Wegg-Prosser, who's very well known for his own business reasons. And, talking to others, sort of broader business voices like the British Chambers of Commerce, Siobhan Haviland, saying that the investment summit is a good thing, but they've got to tell the world that the UK is open for business. It's mistimed, though. That's the real worry.
Well, this, of course, is all happening as we're counting down to the budget on the 30th of October.
Yeah, and the real worry is, what are the tax announcements going to be from the Chancellor Rachel Reeves? Lloyd Lee, who's the managing partner, co-founder of U Capital, which is a huge developer in London, involved in Olympia, which is in West London, a big conference centre. They ploughed lots of money into that, and they've got other major investments underway too. They say, actually, yes, we are investing more in London because of the new government, as a result of the new government. One of the few who said out and out, yes, we are. But he's concerned broadly about what happens if there are more black holes in the finances, that perhaps business has been spooked. Have a listen also to the British Chambers of Commerce Director General Siobhan Haviland, who says that businesses are worried when the Chancellor talks about the burden falling on those with the broadest shoulders, that means business. Have a listen to her.
The Chancellor needs to find the money she needs in the right places that don't impact economic growth. But she also needs to tell the story, the wider story. The UK is a really great place to start, grow and invest in a business.
And that's the strange thing, because actually the UK economic performance hasn't been too bad recently. And yet there's a big worry about taxation on the macro front, but also specifically for private equity investors. Are there going to be changes to the rules around carried interest? That is a huge question. Bill Curtin, who's the head of M&A at Hogan Lovells, talked about if there's increasing costs through taxation, interest rates and the like, it doesn't paint a pretty picture for private equity in the UK. He says how the budget is resolved is going to be very important for confidence in the UK. So basically 3 months into this new UK government, a lot of people in the city don't feel we can judge on the economic impact yet, but they still want clarity, detail, the industrial strategy. They are starting to get more nervous about what Starmer and Reeves and the team can actually deliver.
Yeah, of course, so pointing to a very difficult road ahead too for the government. Caroline, thanks for bringing us details of your reporting. I'm going to turn to another story now. Elon Musk has unveiled the long-awaited prototype of a Tesla driverless taxi called the Cybercab. He says production could start in 2026 and the vehicle may cost less than $30,000. Our transport reporter Danny Lee joins us now for more. Hey Danny, what do we need to know then about the Cybercab?
the morning? Well, it definitely looks more striking than the Cybertruck. That's for the starters. And Elon Musk came in overnight with this driving in with what is a prototype that has no steering wheel, no pedals, very much this autonomous vehicle, this Cybercab that is going to determine basically Tesla's future and the future direction and its fortunes here. And so Elon Musk outlined that this is going to be a product that will come out, be ready by 2026 and be available for less than $30,000 US and sold directly to consumers. But Elon Musk has made many predictions before and he's been wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think the timeline is realistic, 2026?
It's going to be aggressive purely because there's a lot hinges on the technology that powers this Cybercab, particularly around Tesla's AI capabilities. And this AI capability is not just around the technology, but this is also fundamental to Tesla's huge valuations here. And so getting that all right, and particularly we've talked about many times before, what was called full self-driving that Tesla's gone full-throated into, getting that to work and work in a way in which this Cybercab, which has no steering wheel and pedals, is going to be very challenging and something investors, particularly regulators, will be watching very closely on.
Yeah, because Johnny, I feel like we've been hearing about driverless cars and this technology for quite a long time now, and yet there's been a lot of regulatory reticence around letting these cars on the roads to kind of function properly. I mean, how much would have to change on that front for these cyber taxis to actually be allowed to operate?
I think it's going to take a monumental shift here, and particularly, we haven't heard much about the technology behind this Cybercab overall yet, and particularly, what are the fallback measures and how this will come into being in real world conditions, frankly. And, we've been hearing from Bloomberg Intelligence, who is doubtful at the moment that regulatory approval, particularly in the US, will pass because of the lack of these fundamental features of what is normally what you see and have in a car. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle, and you see how much someone like Elon Musk has tried to court the likes of China in order to test things such as full self-driving. But going with a car that has different kind of equipment, full stop, is a very different matter.
Yeah, absolutely. What does it mean then for Tesla as a company overall? Obviously, it's grown rapidly, but it's had a lot of challenges, particularly in the last year.
Yeah, I think for Elon Musk, he's helped kind of give a bit more direction into with the kind of product lineup. I think there's still fundamental questions about what this Cybercab is actually meant to be in terms of how this is incorporated into the kind of business model and what kind of product lines that Tesla wants to be selling into, particularly when you still fundamentally are making vehicles and having to make them profitably, but then also as a service ultimately. And so there's that, and there's also still the question of, can someone like Tesla still build a more conventional, affordable vehicle? I think we've seen a little bit of that based on what the Cybercab is potentially offering in having a vehicle under $30,000, but still that challenge and the competition threat, and particularly the competition threat from Chinese EV makers who are really breathing down Tesla's neck here outside of the US. So I still think there are questions around how Tesla can be fit for the future. And, Elon Musk has done a little bit to at least give a glimpse, but there are still more questions that need to be answered around this current product launch.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.